The morning sun filtered softly through the lace curtains, casting gentle patterns across the kitchen table where Emma, grandmother, baker, and relentless lover of her grandchildren, was carefully arranging tiny pastries into a basket. Each swirl of frosting was placed with precision, each cookie stacked just so, as if the care she put into them could somehow carry her love across the miles. The thought of her grandchildren's laughter warmed her more than the sunlight ever could. Emma had been counting the days for this weekend. Saturday and Sunday were sacred, 2 full days to read stories, play board games, bake cookies, and hear the patter of little feet in her house. She had planned it all, from pancake breakfasts shaped like bears to a scavenger hunt in the backyard. It had been months since she had seen their bright eyes sparkle with joy at her little surprises, and the thought of their hugs had kept her spirits alive through long, lonely weeks. She picked up her phone and dialed her daughter, Sarah, humming softly as she waited. "Hi, Mom." Sarah's voice sounded rushed, distracted. "Hi, sweetheart. I was just checking on the weekend plans," Emma said, trying to keep her voice steady. But the words that followed made her chest tighten in a way she hadn't felt in years. "Well," Sarah hesitated. "I think you should talk to Michael first." Emma felt a flicker of unease. "Talk to Michael?" she asked, confusion coloring her tone. "Yes, he said something yesterday. He wants to set up the schedule and, well, the arrangement." Emma's heart skipped. "Arrangement." Before Sarah could respond, the doorbell rang. Emma opened it to find Michael, her son-in-law, leaning casually against the frame, arms crossed, and a smirk that made her stomach churn. She felt the warmth in her chest turn icy. "I hear you want to spend time with the kids this weekend," he said, almost lazily, but his eyes glinted with something sharp, calculating. "That'll be $2,000." Emma blinked, thinking she had misheard. "Excuse me, you heard me," Michael said, tone smug, as if this were a perfectly reasonable transaction rather than an outrageous demand. $2,000. That's the fee for babysitting, entertainment, love, affection. Pick a word. It all costs money, you know. For a moment, Emma felt as if the room were spinning. Her knees almost buckled under the weight of such cold-heartedness. She had loved Michael like family, trusted him as part of the circle that kept her family safe and happy. And now this, a price tag on her own grandchildren. I think you must be joking," she whispered, gripping the doorframe. Michael shook his head slowly, eyes sharp. "I'm not joking. You want to see my kids, pay up. Otherwise, maybe they stay with me and we'll have a quiet weekend without you." Emma felt a hot sting behind her eyes, the first tears of betrayal threatening to fall. She wanted to scream, to cry, to strike him with the weight of all her hurt, but she didn't. She squared her shoulders and forced a polite smile, the kind she had perfected over decades of handling life's cruelties with quiet dignity. "I see," she said softly, but beneath the calm exterior, her heart was breaking. $2,000. Michael nodded, satisfied. He straightened up, adjusting his jacket, as if the matter were settled. "I'll wait for the envelope," he said, and with that, he turned and left, leaving Emma standing in the doorway, her hands trembling slightly from shock and fury. Once the door clicked shut, Emma sank into the nearest chair, pressing her face into her hands. The betrayal wasn't just financial. It was emotional, moral, and devastating. This man who had married into her family, who had promised to love and protect her daughter and grandchildren, had put a price on their happiness. Yet, as the tears began to fall, Emma's heart started to harden, not in anger, not in hatred, but in quiet, simmering determination. She would not let greed dictate the love of her grandchildren. There was a way to show Michael the true cost of his actions, and it didn't require money. For now she allowed herself to grieve, to feel the heartbreak of betrayal. But deep down she began to plan. Her revenge would be sweet, precise, and unforgettable, and most importantly, it would be emotional, the kind that left no scars on her heart, only lessons on his. The house was unusually quiet that afternoon. Emma moved through it with deliberate calm, her hands folding towels, her mind weaving a tapestry of careful, deliberate thoughts. Every plate she washed, every cookie she frosted, every note she wrote to her grandchildren felt like a rehearsal for the scene that would unfold in a matter of hours. She knew Michael would expect compliance. He would expect her to panic, to scurry for money, to beg for the privilege of seeing his children. And she knew he would be smug when he received the envelope, but Emma had no intention of giving him what he wanted, not his money, not his satisfaction, not his smug sense of superiority. Instead, she would give him the truth. Emma had always been clever. A lifetime of navigating the delicate balances of family dynamics, of raising her daughter, of weathering life's disappointments, had sharpened her instincts. She knew exactly how to hit someone where it hurt most. Pride, greed was his weakness, and she intended to exploit it fully. She took a deep breath, inhaling the sweet scent of the pastries she had baked. Chocolate chip cookies, cinnamon rolls, delicate tarts, little tokens of her love for the grandchildren. They were not just treats. They were symbols of the life Michael could not touch with his cold, calculating demands. The envelope rested on the kitchen counter, pristine and crisp. Emma held it in her hands, turning it over, feeling its weight, or rather, the lack of it. She smiled faintly. The envelope contained nothing, not a single bill, just the paper itself, empty and deceptively simple. Her mind wandered briefly to the past. She remembered the first time Michael had come into their lives, charming, polite, the perfect addition to the family. She had welcomed him with open arms, baked him pies, shared stories of her youth. And slowly, over the years, the charm had faded, replaced by entitlement, arrogance, and a subtle cruelty that had gone unchecked until now. Emma's thoughts drifted to Sarah, her daughter, who had married the wrong man, but had tried so hard to make it work. And to the children, bright, innocent, trusting children, caught in the middle of a petty greed that they had done nothing to deserve. The injustice of it burned in her chest, but it also fueled a quiet, simmering determination. When Michael arrived, Emma greeted him at the door with her practiced calm. She was smiling, polite, serene, the picture of a grandmother, ready to hand over her hard-earned love. "Hello, Michael," she said warmly, holding out the envelope as though it were a gift. "Here's what you asked for." Michael's eyes lit up with triumph as he snatched the envelope from her hand. "Finally," he said, his voice dripping with satisfaction. "Let's see the money, shall we?" Emma's lips curved into the faintest smile, but her eyes betrayed nothing. She watched him carefully, noting the way he fumbled with the seal, the slight tremor of anticipation in his hands. For all his arrogance, he did not suspect a thing. As he tore open the envelope, Emma felt a peculiar thrill, not of malice, but of justice. She had endured the heartbreak of his betrayal, the sting of his audacity, but now the balance of power was shifting ever so slightly. She watched quietly as Michael's expression changed confusion, disbelief, and then something darker, hotter, fury. What is this?" he demanded, waving the empty envelope. Where's the money?" Emma's calm voice cut through his anger like a knife wrapped in silk. "There is no money, Michael," she said softly, each word deliberate, weighted with truth, "because love cannot be bought, and if you truly cared for your children, you would never have demanded it." Michael's face turned red, his jaw tightening. He opened his mouth to argue, to shout, but Emma simply met his gaze, unflinching, serene. The quiet strength in her eyes was more powerful than any scream, more devastating than any insult. She let him stew in his rage for a moment, savoring the sight of his smugness unraveling. This was the calm before the storm, and she had already won. Meanwhile, Emma's mind was already turning toward the weekend, toward the children. They would still come, still laugh, still play, and she would make sure of it. Michael could scream, yell, and demand money, but he could not take away what truly mattered, the love she held for her grandchildren. And for Emma, that realization brought a quiet satisfaction. Revenge was not in violence, not in anger. It was in truth, in exposure, in holding the line between love and greed. Michael had asked for money, but he would receive something far more piercing. a mirror reflecting the emptiness of his soul. The stage was set, the envelope was open, the storm was coming, and Emma, calm and resolute, stood ready to see the consequences of a man who had put a price on love. The house had grown tense, charged with a kind of silent electricity that only precedes a storm. Emma stood in the kitchen, her hands folded calmly in front of her, as Michael's face contorted in disbelief and then rage. The envelope, so deceptively empty, lay in his hands like a detonator for every suppressed emotion he had harbored. What is this?" Michael shouted, his voice breaking the afternoon quiet. Why is this envelope empty?" Emma didn't flinch. She looked at him with the serene patience of someone who had been wronged, but refused to give power to anger. "I told you," she said softly, each word deliberate, measured, like carefully aimed arrows. "There is no money because love cannot be bought. You put a price on what should have been priceless, and now you see that there is a cost to greed." Michael's eyes widened as he stared at her, incredulity giving way to fury. He slammed the envelope onto the counter, scattering papers and cookie crumbs across the surface. You can't do this," he shouted. "You don't understand. I need that money." Emma shook her head almost gently, and yet there was an iron hardness behind her expression. "No, Michael, what you need is humility, and perhaps a reminder that children are not currency." For a moment, the house seemed suspended in time. The ticking of the wall clock sounded like the heartbeat of judgment. Michael's shoulders tensed, his fists clenching, but Emma remained calm, her voice steady. "I wanted to spend the weekend with my grandchildren," she continued, her tone soft but heavy with meaning. "I wanted to bake for them, play games, read stories, make memories, but you put a price on that, and now you see the result." Michael's breathing grew ragged. He pointed a shaking finger at her. "You can't humiliate me like this. I'm their father." Emma allowed a small, almost imperceptible smile to cross her lips. "And yet today you have shown them something else entirely," she said. "You have shown them that greed can poison love. You have shown them that words can hurt, that selfishness can destroy joy. Do you understand now, Michael?" His face flushed a darker red, veins bulging in his neck. He opened his mouth to shout again, but the words faltered. For the first time, perhaps, he realized that no amount of anger could buy back the respect, the love, or the dignity he had lost in his own eyes. Emma stepped closer, her voice low and steady, almost tender. "You wanted money. I gave you truth. You wanted control. I gave you the reflection of your choices. And now, if you will excuse me, I will spend my weekend with the children who truly matter, leaving you with whatever lesson this has taught you." Michael's hands trembled as he looked around the room, as if grasping for some sense of authority he could no longer claim. He was flustered, humiliated, and utterly powerless. The neighbors, walking past the window, might have heard the heated words, might have glimpsed the scene, but Emma did not care. This was not about spectacle, it was about justice. As she walked past him, collecting her baking basket and the board games she had prepared, she felt a quiet satisfaction settle in her chest. The storm had broken, and she had emerged unscathed. Michael's fury could rage, his ego could roar, but the truth, the quiet, unassailable truth, was hers. By the time she reached her car, she could hear Michael still shouting behind the closed door. But she did not look back. She knew the children would be waiting, oblivious to the drama that had unfolded, ready to embrace her with the innocence and love that she had always cherished. Driving toward her grandchildren's house, Emma let herself smile freely. The battle had been won, not through violence, not through anger, but through clarity, courage, and a little bit of clever strategy. She had faced greed with grace, entitlement with poise, and cruelty with quiet justice. And as the familiar neighborhood came into view, with its swings, trees, and laughter echoing faintly in the distance, Emma realized the sweetest revenge was not in seeing Michael suffer. It was in the children's laughter, in their untainted joy, in knowing that love, in the end, could never be bought or sold. Michael would scream, fume, and stew. But she, Emma, would have what he could never take from her, the hearts of the children who loved her, the memories she would create with them, and the quiet knowledge that truth always finds a way to triumph over greed. The sun was just beginning its slow descent, painting the sky in soft shades of orange and gold, as Emma parked her car outside her daughter's house. Her heart swelled in anticipation, not with fear or anger, but with pure joy, the kind that only comes from the promise of children's laughter. As she stepped onto the porch, the door swung open. Two pairs of wide, curious eyes stared back at her, followed by tiny voices that erupted in unrestrained excitement. "Grandma!" they shouted in unison, running into her arms. Emma felt tears sting her eyes, not tears of sorrow this time, but of relief and love. She hugged them tightly, inhaling the familiar scent of childhood sunlight, crayons, and a hint of cookie crumbs from earlier mischief. "Did you bring treats?" asked the older one, bouncing on their toes. "Of course," Emma said, opening her basket to reveal the carefully arranged pastries, each one a symbol of her love. She smiled as the children's eyes lit up. They had no idea what had happened that day, no inkling of the chaos Michael had caused. They only knew that their grandmother had come, just as she had promised, with cookies, games, and stories to fill the weekend. Inside the house, Emma set the scene. A board game on the coffee table, a stack of picture books, and a little note for each child with a tiny challenge or riddle. She felt her heart lift with every laugh, every squeal of delight, every moment of pure, innocent joy. Meanwhile, back at her own house, Michael was still seething. He had screamed, raged, and stomped around, trying in vain to justify his actions. But the emptiness of the envelope, and the humiliation of being out, maneuvered by someone he had deemed harmless, gnawed at him. The neighbors who had caught glimpses of his shouting whispered among themselves, and his own spouse began to question his priorities and temperament. Michael's children, blissfully unaware of his demands, had already started noticing the absence of tension in their grandmother's presence. They didn't see greed, they saw love. They didn't see a price tag, they saw laughter. And in that simple realization, Emma's victory was complete. That evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon and painted the living room with a warm amber glow, Emma tucked her grandchildren into bed. She read their favorite story, each word weighted with affection and care, feeling the steady rise and fall of their breathing as they drifted off to sleep. When she finally stepped out of the room, Sarah approached, her eyes soft but tinged with concern. "Mom," Michael called, she said cautiously. "He's furious. He doesn't understand why you didn't give him the money." Emma smiled gently. "He's angry because he realized something he didn't want to face, that love isn't something you can buy. He put a price on happiness, and he saw the cost of that choice today. Let him be. Furious. It's his lesson to learn." Sarah shook her head, still worried but relieved. "You always were clever, Mom. I hate that it had to come to this." Emma placed a reassuring hand on her daughter's shoulder. "It didn't have to. I wanted my grandchildren, and I have them. That's all that matters. Justice, when done quietly and wisely, is sweeter than any payment he could have demanded." Later, as Emma drove home, she reflected on the day. She had faced betrayal, humiliation, and greed, and emerged not only intact but victorious in the only way that truly counted, morally, emotionally, and spiritually. She hadn't needed to yell or strike or hurt anyone. She had simply remained calm, clever, and loving, allowing Michael's own flaws to expose themselves. The laughter of her grandchildren still echoed in her mind, a melody more satisfying than any amount of money. Love, she realized, had no price, and truth had a power that no arrogance could ever overcome. And as the stars began to shimmer in the night sky, Emma knew this. She had given the children memories they would treasure forever, taught Michael a lesson he would never forget, and reclaimed the joy that greed had tried to steal. In that quiet victory, there was no bitterness, only the deep, enduring sweetness of justice finally served. The weekend had been hers all along, not because of money, not because of confrontation, but because of love, the kind of love that cannot be bought and cannot be broken. And in that truth, Emma found peace, joy, and the most satisfying revenge of all.